From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
The sometimes sleepy corner of the Rhode Island State House is just a heartbeat away from being thrust into the spotlight, the office of Lieutenant Governor. Current office holder Elizabeth Roberts is leaving due to term limits, so the seat is facing a primary from both major parties. This week on Newsmakers, Republican candidate for Lieutenant Governor Carrie Youn. Then, down to the wire, the last-minute rush to get their voters to the polls. Eyewitness News political analyst Joe Fleming on the push to primary day. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Good morning, everyone. Kara, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Simple question for you. Why do you want to be Lieutenant Governor?
Well, the simple answer is I want to bring Rhode Island back to life. And I want to do that in three ways. I want to bring our economy back to life. I want to bring us back to a culture of life where human life is respected from conception to natural death. And I want to bring us our public confidence and our public officials back to life by rooting out corruption and being a watchdog and sort of a Paul Revere for the Rhode Island public.
Lofty goals for the office of Lieutenant Governor, which has very specific set of priorities. Why aren't you running for governor then, if you want to do all those things?
Well, I think this is the right office for me. I mean, the areas that you mentioned, the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council, the Small Business Advisory Council, and the Emergency Management Advisory Council those are all defined roles that I feel that can be expanded to fit a lot of the initiatives that I'd like to see come about. But I also want to expand the role of Lieutenant Governor to be sort of an ambassador for Rhode Island. I'd like to use my marketing experience. I was the Director of Sales and Marketing at the University of Rhode Island Ryan Center in Bosai Serena for almost 7 years. I was on the board of directors for the South Kingstown Chamber of Commerce and the South County Tourism Council, and I have a lot of experience in putting proposals together. I made $3 million for the Ryan Center while I was there. Getting companies to come in, going out to businesses that are in other states or even in other countries and saying, look, this is what we're going to offer you for you to relocate in Rhode Island.
I want to ask you about something you said in that answer off the top. You said this is the right office for me. And speaking frankly, in 2010, you were running for both Congress and Lieutenant Governor. Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were running for Lieutenant Governor, you also initially put in your name for U.S. Senate, and then you withdrew it. So I guess my question is, how do you tell people to take your candidacy seriously if you're blanketing the ballot with your name over and over again?
Well, this year I wanted to run only for Lieutenant Governor, and the Rhode Island GOP initially did not have a candidate running, and then Mark Sakaria did step up and did run, and I think he'll do a good job in bringing about a lot of the shortfalls that Jack Reed obviously has exhibited. If I had had the backing of the Rhode Island GOP, if I had gotten the nomination for Lieutenant Governor, I would have just stayed with that race only. And in fact, I really did withdraw my name from the U.S. Senate race after just 2 days. So. But
can we expect to see your name if you don't win in the primary or the general election, if you succeed there, and in 2 years are we going to see your name again on another ballot?
I wouldn't rule anything out, but I really would like to be Lieutenant Governor. I really feel that there's so much that I can bring to this office, so much that I can do for Rhode Island in this office, and I really want to get the chance to do that.
You know, we're a political show. Obviously, money matters a lot in politics. We looked, you have $75 in your campaign account, and your website is mainly your Facebook page. Do you actually think you might beat Taylor in the primary, or are you running as more of a statement to bring attention to your issues and talk about this
stuff?
And
that's Catherine Taylor.
Excuse me, Catherine Taylor, the other Republican on the ballot.
Actually, I do have a web page. I'm not sure if you...
Our mistake.
A website.
Okay,
but,
sorry.
I don't feel that there needs to be so much money in politics. I think that it makes a great statement to be able to do that without money and to be someone who just can run on their ideas, how it used to be, when our country started. It wasn't all about money and raising millions of dollars. It was about what our forefathers had to say. One of my forefathers, by the way, I'm a direct descendant of Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Maryland, and he was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, the only Catholic and the longest living signer. I think that people will definitely vote for me. I think people are very aware of a lot of the advocacy work that both my husband and myself have continued to do for the state. And I think a lot of people realize that Catherine Taylor has been said by many to be a close political ally of Chafee. And Chafee really, he has horrible approval ratings. He's left our state in a terrible state, and he's really abused the office, using it sort of as a dictatorship with his executive orders, his radical pro-abortion and sort of anti-family agenda. And she was a senior advisor for Chafee and a speechwriter for Chafee.
Director of Elderly Affairs recently, and before that
in
his
addition
Senate
to that,
office.
yeah, a senior advisor, a speechwriter for him, and then she got an appointment by Chafee. So I think that people would like to see somebody with no ties to Chafee. And in fact, I've consistently written op-eds against a lot of Chafee's policies that have been published in the Providence Journal, and I have a strong track record in being against a lot of the policies that he's initiated, like Obamacare in Rhode Island. And
knowing your advocacy work around abortion, around pro-life causes, I was somewhat surprised when I saw that Rhode Island Right to Life endorsed both you and Democrat Ralph Mollis for Lieutenant Governor. Were you disappointed by that choice by Rhode Island Right to Life, or do you think both of you have equal merit on the question of abortion?
Oh, well, I'm certainly more pro-life, much more pro-life than Ralph Mollis. But what they did was they endorsed somebody on the Democratic primary side and somebody on the Republican primary side. So I was very happy to get their endorsement, and they do a lot of great work. And in fact, if I could just, this is a good segue, but one of the things that Chafee did, which was so anti-life, was in initiating Health Source Rhode Island, and in tandem with Elizabeth Roberts and Planned Parenthood and a lot of others, he actually put that into effect by executive order, bypassing the state legislature, just so that he could get a pro-life clause that was going to be put in there out, just so that he could keep it so that all 28 plans have to mandate abortion funding. So there can't even be one plan until 2017 where Rhode Islanders could have the choice not to have their taxpayers go directly to fund abortion. So that's just an example of really using your executive office as a dictatorship.
I want to talk to you about an idea you have to eliminate the car excise tax.
Yes.
Okay. That is music to the ears of many who are watching this program for sure. But in doing so, you would gut cities and towns of a lot of revenue. So how would you offset that loss?
Well, two ways. One, I think we need to be bringing in businesses, and I think that I really have a lot of experience in doing that, putting proposals together, working together with those same cities and towns to go out and target specific businesses, give them the zoning easements or the tax abatements.
Seems like a long game, though, compared to what an immediate hurt
with what we have, and with a bold tourism campaign that I'd like to do in conjunction with that to get people excited about Rhode Island, not just also for just visitors around New England to choose Rhode Island as their place to come on vacation, but also for those businesses to think, wow, look at the historic nature of the cities and towns in Rhode Island, look at the beautiful beaches. Wouldn't this be a great place to bring our business, because we can attract a lot of employees who would like to live in Rhode Island. The second way is I want to tax products that are made in China and other countries that have a very low labor rate to equal the playing field. Because right now, if you've got a product, if you're a company and you could make a product in China for 20 cents, why are you going to do that here in Rhode Island where it could cost you $4 to make that same product? So we need to be taxing that, and we can do it because we do it with cigarettes. We need to be taxing those products.
Anticipating my next question, clearly. I mean, really, again, like my first question, Office of Lieutenant Governor, is that the right fit for all these things that you want to do?
Yes, why can't it be a revenue-generating position?
How, as Lieutenant Governor, do you get rid of the car tax?
It's a revenue-generating position, and you work with the legislature to enact legislation to help small businesses by cutting regulations and red tape and fees.
The legislature that you have used as a punching bag.
Well, I can work together well, though, with people, and I have in initiating legislation on both sides of the aisle, whether it's working against building schools on toxic dump sites that my husband and myself and really mostly Chris, actually, with Victor
Moffett. And we should point out your husband is Chris Youn, who's a Democratic candidate for Mayor of Providence.
Yep, is actually at Channel 10 right now, taping a debate. And I think that I have so much experience in these health initiatives that I really want to bring forward for people, that I would, under the heading of Let's Bring Rhode Island, as I said, there's 3 tenets to bringing Rhode Island back to life. 1, let's bring our economy back to life. 2, we need to bring ourselves back to a culture of life and bring our population back to life. And I don't know if you guys saw the New York Times article last year, Shrinking Rhode Island, Likely to Lose a House Seat. where it shows that Rhode Island, along with Vermont, was one of only 2 states to actually lose population between July 2011 and July 2012. I mean, that is abysmal. We could actually lose a House seat. But people need to understand that we need more people in Rhode Island buying our goods and services, more people paying into Social Security, more people paying their shouldering their share of the tax burden so that it doesn't just go on the backs of a few. So there's never been an economy where you had a population that regressed, where you didn't also have an economy that really faltered. So we need to bring our population back to life, and part of that is really letting people know about a lot of health dangers that aren't being really brought out in the media, such as, and I really want to be a voice for the voiceless, and that includes primarily the elderly, the unborn, the disabled, those who really are the most vulnerable populations among us. And one of those, the elderly, I've been a great advocate for bringing to light something called their MOLST and POST forms, and this is legislation that's been put forward and enacted throughout the country in a lot of states, and in fact here in Rhode Island in June 2012, where it's really something that it's used as a vehicle to manipulate patients to choose to limit or to refuse care.
Kara, there's always public sort of fascination with you and Chris, right? Because we frequently see you on the ballots. You live very public lives. You're very vocal about what you believe and why you do that. I think people want to know what drives you in particular, since you're our guest today, what drives you to be so involved in public life? Many people get frustrated by the things you're talking about. So few take the really public advocacy role that you have. Was there a spark that made you decide that, like, I'm gonna fight my way into the political system, even if I'm not getting endorsements from the party or whatnot?
Some of this is just, this stuff is so important, and it's just things that you just can't believe aren't brought out in the media. And you just want to let people know because it's so important to people's lives. Whether it's some of this information is so foreign to people precisely for the reason that they just haven't been given that information. And people can only react to the information that they have. If they knew, for example, that hormonal contraception has been shown to raise your breast cancer risk by 40%, that the World Health Organization has classified the birth control pill as a group 1 carcinogen, meaning definitely cancer causing, in the same category as asbestos and formaldehyde. People don't realize that, but they can Google it and see this. And the opposite is being pushed on the public. They're told that contraception is good for the economy, that it's a panacea, that it's wonderful. And when you see these dichotomies, you see, wow, exactly the opposite of what the public should be being told is being told, and they're really being kept in the dark.
Would you argue as Lieutenant Governor for limiting access to contraception? I know well your position on abortion. Do you think we should outlaw contraception in Rhode Island?
Well, I certainly don't think that we should be having Planned Parenthood in our schools, like they are in some of our schools, directly marketing to our kids and pushing that contraception, which is really a gateway so that they can get money from abortion, because if the kids aren't having...
But his question, please. Do you think it should be legal? Should contraception remain legal?
I would like to see it not promoted to the extent that it is.
So leave it legal, but not mention it as often?
I think that once people find out how bad it is for you, much like smoking, it'll be something that people would not want to take because it's toxic.
So specifically the pill, condoms are not as big a problem?
Well, as a Catholic, of course I'm against any forms of contraception, but hormonal contraception specifically, the birth control pill, Norplant, IUDs that have the hormones, that's what actually has a toxic effect that can cause breast cancer, cervical cancer, and liver cancer. And to just tell you really quick, another thing that drives me is really, too, our daughter Mary, who's 8 months old. My husband and I are going to be celebrating our 2nd year anniversary, I can't believe it, this Monday. And actually, everybody was invited to the wedding, and I've been running the video.
Briefly, Kara.
Okay, I'm sorry, but they can still watch it on TV. It's going to be playing over the next month if you're in Kent County. But that's another thing, you see the next generation coming up, and you don't want them to be kept in the dark. You need to sort of shine a light in the darkness, even though there's so much, it's so pervasive. The corruption is so pervasive, and that, was my third tenet. I want to bring us back to a culture where we can have confidence in our public officials, where we don't have these 38 studio scandals, 75 million missing from the landfill, where a light is shown on what's going on. These insider
Kara, we
deals.
have to go to a break. So yes or no? If you lose in the Republican primary for Lieutenant Governor, will you endorse Catherine Taylor? Yes or no?
I don't know. I mean, she won't say that she's pro-life. I know that she's supported same-sex marriage. I don't think that I can support someone who's anti-life or against same-sex or for same-sex marriage, like she is.
Kara Young is the one of the Republican candidates for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And when we come back, we're going to dissect the last few days until the primary with our Eyewitness News political analyst, Joe Fleming. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and we're joined by Eyewitness News political analyst Joe Fleming.
Joe, first time this year I've seen you, I think, right?
It's been a few times.
What a get to have you on the program.
Finally.
All right, let me ask you both. I'm not going to ask you who do you think will win the primary, but who do you think is the favorite right now? And not just the Democratic primary, but both. Ted?
I think Gina Raimondo is the favorite going into Tuesday on the Democratic side. I really think she, she was ahead in our most recent poll that Joe did last month. She spent so much money. You've seen, I think you haven't seen her campaign go after Angel
Frank
or
Caprio
Clay.
spent a lot of money.
He did, but he was already fading.
And of course, I mean 2010.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but she spent it effectively and not been a bad candidate, unlike Frank Caprio, and that makes a difference. And I think you would have seen her campaign go hard after Angel Taveras or Clay Pell this week if their internal polling showed she was in trouble, and we haven't seen that. On the Republican side,
let me ask you, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
do you think they're looking at that? It would be expensive, but every day?
I
doing
presume
overnights?
they never will tell us exactly what they're
Sure.
doing. I presume they're doing tracking polling. Every night you call another, what is it, Joe, 100 people maybe, and you add it to the sample and you see, are we moving up, moving down, is someone else gaining? And as we've said, Gina Raimondo, the money advantage, and people hate it, but you just have to take stock of the fact that she spent over $4 million. That is a massive advantage in this race. And I think she's a favorite on the Republican side. I think Alan Fung, I still consider him the favorite, a slight favorite.
Why?
It's not that, and I know people out there will get surprised, I think, because his campaign hasn't always been great, but he's the endorsed Republican candidate. He's the mayor of our third largest city in Rhode Island, which should be worth quite a few votes. And, Ken Block has had these issues with having voted for Barack Obama, but I will not be surprised if Ken Block beats him that night, but it will be an upset, I think.
Joe?
Well, I agree with most of what Ted says. I think Gina is probably considered the favorite at this time due to the fact that last survey had her up by 5 points. And I agree, she is acting like she has the lead. She has not changed what she's done in the last couple weeks. She's staying on message. She's not attacking either one of the other two candidates at this point. She's just trying to get a good positive message across. She's acting like she has a lead, and she knows it. And I agree, they are probably doing tracking where they do 100 each night and throw off the first 100 from 5 days ago. On the Republican side, I won't venture to guess who's going to win that. I think a lot of it's going to depend on how big of a margin Alan Fung comes out at Cranston and Warwick with. How big is that spread over Ken Block? Can he get enough votes out in Cranston and Warwick to vote for him where he has a big margin to overcome Block in other areas of the state? Because I think Block's done a good job trying to get the conservative-type Republicans to support him. Again, both of them, I'm looking at the players. I mean, you have Alan Fung, who voted in the Democratic primary, Ken Block, who was the moderate party chairman at one time, so you don't really have two Republicans that have been Republicans their whole life.
These are not movement conservatives.
No.
They don't have a perfect person in that
Not at all.
primary, the party members.
And their endorsements lately have been, my Republican is bigger than yours. Which one do you think resonates better, John Robitaille versus Mitt Romney? So Robitaille endorsing Block, Romney endorsing Fung.
I'll go back to Chip O'Neill. All politics is local, and John Robitaille is a local person. I think that helps Ken Block more than the Mitt Romney ones. Because John Robitaille, people relate to. They know he lost a very close race. People have blamed Ken Block for that, but obviously he does not.
Briefly,
so that helps him.
Tim, one thing that goes against my feeling that Fung is a favorite was I found very interesting House Minority Leader Brian Newbery switching allegiance at the start of this week from Alan Fung to Ken Block. Newbery, a very savvy political guy. He pays close attention to stuff. He wants Republicans to gain in this state, and he clearly felt. I don't know necessarily that Newbery felt that Block was more likely to win this week. I think he more felt Block would be the stronger candidate going into the fall for the Republicans, and that's why he switched.
Who do you think the Democrats would want to face more in the general election? Ken Block or Alan Fung?
I think now one of the three Democrats would just like to win at this point. They don't care who the Republican is as long as they win. I think they feel they have ammunition to go after both of them. At the Channel 12 debate the other night, they both took some very conservative positions, supporting right to work. no driver's license for illegal aliens in Rhode Island.
Ammunition.
Ammunition for the Democrats to go in the areas like Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls to really build up the Democratic vote. So I think the Democrats feel they have ammunition to go against either one of the two Republicans.
Let me go back to the Democratic race. True or false, Joe, we'll start with you. If Clay Pell were not in the race, Taveras would be the Democratic nominee for governor.
I think there's a good chance of that. I think the union vote is being divided at this point. Our poll shows that. Angel's getting 31% of the union vote. Clay's getting 31% of the union vote. Public sector unions are divided between these two. If they're both together, I think that Democrat, whether we're with Pell or Taveras, would be a lot stronger.
But Ted, wouldn't the Raimondo campaign just have put on a totally different race had it been head-to-head?
Absolutely, and I think the Gina Raimondo forces will always claim that they could have beaten Angel Taveras in a two-way primary, and of course we'll never get to test that. I think, but I do think one thing that's interesting that's become apparent in the last month or so is, as much as the teachers union leadership is livid with Gina Raimondo about the pension law, or has been strongly opposed to that, clearly they have significant problems with Angel Taveras too, because they can count just as well as we can. They can see that, especially at this point, maybe the more likely outcome at the moment is Gina Raimondo wins it and neither Pell nor Taveras get it. I think if a few months back they felt our number one goal was to stop Gina Raimondo and Clay Pell was at 12% or whatnot, they would have eased him out of the race and gone behind Angel Taveras. I have to think they had reasons to not get behind Angel Taveras either in the teachers union movement. He's a big ed reform guy. Some of the folks around him haven't always seen eye to eye with the teachers union. So I think that's been that's an interesting dynamic I don't know has been fully explored in the public.
It came out this week that in Pell's crazy young days, he was a registered Republican, and that his wife, Michelle Kwan, was also a registered Republican. Does that have any impact in the final few days here?
I think what it could do, Tim, is stop momentum. I think Clay Pell has been building momentum as the campaign went on. When we came out with our poll 2 weeks ago, wow, that gave him a big jolt. People said, well, he is a credible candidate. He's right up there now. And now you have something where he says, I'm the most liberal Democrat in the race. But I really was a Republican for 10 years. So I think that could slow his momentum down. Going to the last weekend, you don't want that. You want to keep a snowball going down the hill.
And he seems to hit a lot of speed bumps.
Well,
every time he's getting...
And the dynamic, just to pivot off what Joe said, the dynamics in a primary are so different from everyone knows presidential general elections. This is nothing like that.
Yeah.
That people can't vote based on party because everyone is in your party by definition. It's a primary. And they have to make judgment calls about these individuals. And by the way, it was just summertime. People haven't been paying a lot of attention to politics. So I think the last days of a campaign are far more important in a primary.
Right.
It's kind of like what you saw with Eric Cantor, where people were so shocked in Virginia. It might have been that his poll that's been so mocked was right, and he just lost a huge amount of ground in the last few days. I think that's how fast a primary can change.
I want to play a soundbite for the both of you from our Republican debate that was taped on Tuesday. This was, of course, again, Ken Block and Alan Fung, and I thought it was a really telling moment from our debate on Tuesday, where Block was asked about the tone of the campaign, and here's what he had to say.
I hate this campaign. This campaign has been full of venom, vile, and half-truths. The voters of this state deserve far better than the negativity that's been out here right now. If we could do this all over again and run it totally differently, I would be all about that. Because little has happened here to help the voters decide who's the best person to run this state and solve the problems that we have right now.
Block saying, I hate this campaign. It was like a therapy session for a minute there, wasn't it? I mean, it was like it's such a moment of truth. And that's kind of unusual in a Republican primary.
It is. The last Republican primary where I saw it real negative was 2006, Laffey and Chafee. But most Republican primaries...
For governor, I should have said.
For governor, I have not seen that at all over the years I've been watching Rhode Island politics. However, I think what Alan Fung did early on, he realized that Ken Block was getting the upper hand, and he had to stop Ken Block's momentum. Block even released a poll showing him up convincingly, and he released the whole poll so people would really accept the poll. And I think Alan Fung realized at that time, if I don't move early, he may solidify this conservative Republican vote in the state of Rhode Island, and then I would have no chance.
Yeah, and
so
Block he said in the debate, essentially, hey, he started it.
Right. Well, he started to basically get his campaign back on track, I believe, because if Block's poll was correct, he was down by that much, he had to stop the bleeding that was going on, and the way you do that is you try to expose Ken Block as someone who supported Barack Obama.
Ted, we only have 2 minutes left in the program, so I want to ask you a question about races that people probably aren't paying a lot of attention to, and that is the General Assembly, but there are a lot of races going on there. Which one should we be watching?
You know, just a couple, and this isn't, you know, these are just a few I'm keeping an eye on. Frank Chacon, longtime state senator in Providence, he might be in trouble. He's facing Doris de Los Santos. His district has changed a lot in the last decade and a half. He's had some ethics problems, although she's had some, and they're running a very aggressive campaign there. They think he's beatable. Chris Wall challenging Gail Golden, also in Providence on the east side. That's another one. A lot of money being spent, outside groups, the realtors coming in for Wall. And Dan McKiernan, a lawyer, challenging incumbent Democrat Maria Cimini. What's interesting, that's in Providence. House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello backing McKiernan, not Cimini, even though Cimini is an incumbent member of his Congress. Mattiello has said Cimini is basically too liberal for him, and McKiernan's one line with him, and I think McKiernan could pull that off. So I think there's a bunch of ones to watch, but those all in Providence are kind of interesting because they might say a little more about a changing Rhode Island as well as the changing political culture of the State House.
Do you think we'll have any surprises down ballot, General?
Not really.
Treasurer?
I think if we hadn't polled it, Seth Magaziner might have surprised people by pulling off a pretty compelling victory. But
is it his to lose?
I think so at this point. I think
Joe?
I think it is Seth's to lose at this point. I mean, our poll showed a dramatic turnaround. I haven't seen anything that's going to change that. But again, keep this one thing in mind for Tuesday, turnout. Turnout is key in a Democratic primary. It's a party primary. Where are the voters coming out? That's going to be key.
All right. Well, Joe Fleming, our Eyewitness News political analyst, and WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, thank you both for joining us. And primary day is September 9th. Make sure you stick with Channel 12 for all your primary day coverage. And, of course, online, WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.